Thank you. Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity, and thank you to our Deputy Premier for agreeing to be interrogated. I've promised not to do a Quentin Dempster on him this morning. Deputy Premier, it's, what, 6 months now since you took on this wonderful role. Tell me, what was going through your mind when you got that phone call and, you know, you're an ex-policeman, you've had a very distinguished career in public service, and it kind of makes sense to offer you gaming and racing. It's a little unusual to put the arts into that portfolio as well, I think, for people internationally. What was your response to that, and why did you take it on with such great enthusiasm?
Well, the first challenge I had was to break down the stereotypes. I was a policeman from Dubbo in Western New South Wales that entered Parliament, and the first question the media asked the Deputy Premier at the time, who offered me this chance, was what would a copper from Dubbo know about the arts? The truth is I studied 3-unit art history for the HSC in Year 12. I was always a keen drawer. I tried to become a professional cartoonist. I just wasn't that good. But I've always had a genuine love for the arts. My family are heavily involved. I have my own art collection. I've commissioned my own works well before I became the Arts Minister. So for me it was an amazing opportunity to work in a space that I genuinely have a love and a passion for. But one of the first challenges straight up, and I think it's a challenge that the arts sector has, is to break down a lot of those stereotypes that exist.
Indeed, which is why I decided to call this session Elitism, Is It Dead? Because for me that is the myth around the arts, and some of the people in this room will know I began my career also in a regional context driving an art bus around Scotland. And what I learned very early on was that what politicians and opinion formers think about what people will say about the arts is very different from what actually happens when you create the context for people to have those amazing encounters with art. Is that what you've perceived in the last 6 months? What's been your response, particularly in the visual arts sector?
Yeah, again, it's how entwined our lives are with whatever genre or whatever type of art form that we have out there. I just don't think we give it the recognition that it deserves about how important it is to our communities, how important it is to our lives, that just happens naturally. And we try to box everything, whereas art itself is accessible, or should be accessible to everybody in whatever form. And fundamentally you like what you like, you're interested in what you're interested in, but the opportunity to access it, and particularly to access the excellence in the arts, does a lot of things. It inspires further creativity, it inspires further investment, it inspires participation. And I think one of the key roles of government is to help partner and create an environment where access to it, whatever art form you're interested in, is an absolute right, and particularly because we've got the most fabulous cultural institutions in Sydney, within the CBD, the collections within them are owned by everyone in New South Wales. So I'm absolutely passionate about making sure access is available, because we've got enormous strength in our arts industry and in our institutions here, and the excellence is just in Australia and New South Wales is astonishing.
And what's it like, without breaking confidences, around the cabinet table? I mean, you're now the Deputy Premier, and I have to say that I think the whole arts sector was really thrilled that you kept the arts along with, I think, 4 or 5 other portfolios, so you're going to be very busy. But around the cabinet table, are there true believers in the arts as well, or is there still some scepticism at the political level about the role and the importance of investing in culture?
No, this is that I'm being 110% honest with you here. When I was sworn in as the Minister for the Arts, I had 7 other ministers wanting me to hand over that portfolio to them. And I knew I was on a good thing straight away. But that, again, breaks down another stereotype, that we're part of a Conservative government in New South Wales, and we aren't traditionally viewed as a government who are economic rationalists, who have a vision or a passion to invest in the art. Nothing could be further from the truth. Those with a different political persuasion, in my experience, are wonderful at coming up with the ideas or thinking about the concepts, but very poor on delivery. Whereas we I think on a conservative side, see and appreciate the value of the arts, and then we find a rational and economic way to actually deliver outcomes, and that's what our focus really is.
Do you think that the arts sector, and particularly here we're talking about museums and galleries, can do more to make the case? Are we any good at it? Are we good at lobbying, or do you think there are things that we could do better?
There's always room for improvement. As the now Minister for Trade and Investment, there's so many opportunities out there. So I recently hosted 16 Consul Generals, and it was on an economic platform looking at opportunities to invest in regional New South Wales. And they knew I was the Minister for the Arts, so they were happy to talk to me about the investments, but they were more keen to talk to me about opportunities in cultural exchanges and investment in the arts. The two aren't mutually exclusive. They actually are linked, and I think arts are linked in so many ways. You don't have to be a sports lover or an art lover or something else. You can actually love it all and participate in it all. And when it comes to driving our economic sustainability, arts and culture has an enormous role to play in making that as prosperous as possible, which then again stimulates the economy so there's more opportunity for further investment. But it can't be just government investment, it's got to be a genuine partnership approach between those philanthropic who already do enormous great work and great contributions into the sector. But I think the world is our oyster in that regard for further partnerships.
Well, that's a very optimistic statement we're hearing here. It's fantastic. We talked at the beginning about perceptions and this idea that the arts are elitist, and I think we're absolutely agreeing that it's not true, though some people may still think it to be true. And you've made reference to sport, and certainly I know from coming from the UK all those years ago that my British friends certainly thought that Australia was not a country where you went for culture, you went for sport, or you went for holidays. I do think that also is changing, and as you say, people can do both. And I'm a proud ambassador of the Sydney Swans, for example, and we've had a long-standing partner with the rugby league team, the Penrith Panthers. So I think undermining those ideas that people are in is back to your boxes. I guess people get put in certain boxes, and we have to work to cross out of them.
Oh, without doubt, I think that's our greatest challenge, is to break down those perceptions, and again, by creating the greatest level of access we can. I think that's the best way to do it, because as soon as you're exposed to the excellence in whether it's fine arts or whether it's performing arts, whatever it may be, you just get inspired, and particularly with our youth. As a child and kids generally, we mimic and look at role models, and obviously the sporting stars are the ones that are most commonly in our face on TV and the like, and they're the heroes. But the same is true in arts, is that there are heroes. As a kid growing up, mine was Murray Ball, the New Zealand cartoonist and author of Foot Rot Flats. So as a kid, all I did was mimic his work and created my own character and my own cartoon book and the like, and used that as my major work. So I had my footy heroes and I had my community heroes and the like. So I think there's an opportunity for us, is to showcase the excellence that we have and put the heroes of the art world more openly to the greater public, so the kids in our community can look up to them, have them as role models, understand and then mimic, and I think that builds momentum.
That's right on message for this conference, of course, which is about communication and how we communicate the messages about the extraordinary talent that we have here in this country. And I'm certainly very passionate about that in relation to contemporary art, where my chairman said the other day, isn't it a shame we don't have ticker tape parades for artists? Maybe the Fiona Hall returning from the Venice Biennale should have a ticker tape parade down George Street in the same way as we would do if we'd won the World Cup in rugby or something. So do you think you could put that to the Premier for me?
Look, I'll give anything a crack. But the good thing, and I'm very confident saying this, and this is not a throwaway line, but we have a Premier now, and I'm extraordinarily proud to serve beside him, who has a genuine vision, not only just for building roads and bridges and hospitals and all those key service things that our communities need, but he has a real, genuine vision for the arts and cultural sector in this state. We are very close to landing this state's first ever arts and cultural policy that talks about the diversity of our state, talks about our great assets, but it also comes with funding. This is the first time a cabinet of the New South Wales government has ever reached this point, and I'm enormously proud to be the author of that document with some terrific help from the likes of yourselves and the cultural museums and all the key stakeholders across the arts sector. But more importantly, part of that process was the engagement with the community, telling us what they wanted to see out of our vision for the future and where they wanted to see the investments made. And we've also been bold in talking about breaking away how things are traditionally being funded. Not that we're going to stop certain things, but create the opportunity to look at new ways to fund and partner to make sure that the investment continues, but doesn't always have to continue in the same way. There's plenty of different ideas out there that we can enhance and harness.
How do you find managing those competing priorities, I suppose? You represent the wonderful city of Dubbo, and it has a fantastic regional gallery. We do a lot of work with them. With the metropolitan versus the regions, we've got in Sydney, of course, the Western Sydney debate. I was actually at a seminar in UWS on Monday, and I said, I think we should get rid of the term. There should be no such thing as Western Sydney, because otherwise it's just defining itself in relationship to the CBD. How do we create the notion of the Greater Sydney? How do you manage those different competing priorities? Are they competing, or should there be more collaboration?
Look, they do compete. There's a finite dollar that we have. We have a taxpayer dollar base that we have to divide and carve up over an enormous range of responsibilities in state government. But I don't think it's a competition. It's more about understanding the value of our investments and how they can actually help mitigate other expenses, or actually help with the health of our communities overall. So the hospitals and health sector are building a lot of health infrastructure, but fundamental to what they're doing is making sure that there's public art available or included in the design of those new hospitals. We need to do a lot more. When we build a road, I think the road's going to be only better if it's got, and I think Melbourne did this pretty well, has an element of public art. And that way it's in the front of people's minds, it's very visible, and it helps accumulate interest, it helps get this rolling momentum, I guess.
So you've got your eyes on the Roads Minister's budget. That's pretty good. There's a lot of money there.
I haven't told him the whole detail yet, Lizanne, but I'm working on it.
Are we in Chatham House rules here today?
Yeah. Well, look, I've got my eyes on the Planning Minister, the Roads Minister, the Transport Minister. The whole lot of them are in my scope, because, and the good thing is that they're all passionate, and they're a lot of the people that ask for the arts portfolio, so I don't think I'm going to have to do a lot of arm twisting.
That's good. It's good to hear. And it's a subject I'm very dear to my heart too, is how we have an understanding of the role that the arts plays in a much wider context. We're not confined to our fabulous buildings that most of us run and have to communicate out of. It's much more about creating a dialogue around programming and creating collaborations that come out of working together and focusing on what it is that we do best, and then showcasing it to the world rather than just focusing on internally.
Absolutely, and we can't afford to look in, we have to look out. And I know, having the benefit of being the minister, of what each of my cultural institutions are doing, but one of the directors mentioned this to me the other day, which has stuck with me, is that our cultural institutions don't actually cross-pollinate. And I'll give you a little example of why this really works well in a second. We don't actually promote each other, and there's a lot of merit and benefit to that, and it can be simple as on each of the web pages promoting what's happening at each of the other cultural institutions. I think that's such an easy way to compound and complement what's happening out there. For those who aren't locally, but Channel 9 in New South Wales, Australia, was pretty much the dominant free-to-air TV network for a long, extended period of time. And a gentleman called Kerry Stokes, in charge of Channel 7, came in. And the Australian Open is probably the biggest broadcasted sporting event over a 2-week period. And he brought in an initiative which I've always been impressed about, where he cross-promoted and pollinated. As he telecast the Australian Open, he showcased every other product during that telecast to the world.
So nuts, by the way.
So while you might have been watching or glancing past Federer versus Nadal, in the sporting terms, you then knew that Better Homes and Gardens was going to be on at this time, and this new TV show and I think that was an amazing strategy. And the Seven Network, I think, do it better than most, is that cross-promotion, cross-pollination, and I think there's a massive opportunity in the arts to do that, because we're not competitors. I think we actually need each other and strength in numbers. The old saying, divided we fall, together we stand.
Well, indeed, I've always felt that collaboration is much more productive, and that's why the Art Gallery and the MCA have, for example, the Sydney International Art Series, which we're getting much better, I think, at promoting jointly. But I certainly, when I came here, found Sydney quite a difficult city from that point of view. There wasn't a sense of a sector or the arts getting together for the common good. It was everybody for themselves, and maybe that's just coming out of our history, but I think that's changed dramatically in the last few years. We've seen a lot of interesting initiatives that are cross-organisational as opposed to just isolated.
Yeah, and I think that's very true, but it's not good enough just for you and me to know that what's occurring by way of partnership and cooperation. It's not good enough for me just to know that my cultural institutions are actually going out and exhibiting. If the people out there don't know it, then we're missing the mark. We need to do it better. And I don't hold any criticism, I just think we need to have our eyes open and seek and explore every opportunity, because as we do that, the arts economy will continue to grow, and then there's greater opportunity for us to continue to reinvest, and everyone wins if we adopt that approach.
And as this conference has been discussing, it is about telling those stories, and if we don't communicate them to that wider audience, then what are we here for? It's not about a conversation among ourselves, it's about that conversation with everybody, and it is fantastic to have a conversation like this with a politician.
So.
Just one final word, your vision, if there's one thing you'd want to say to this conference, many people here from overseas, what is it about Sydney and about New South Wales from an arts perspective that you would like to highlight?
We have the oldest arts history in the world, first of all. Our Indigenous arts, and we have the greatest diversity in arts in the world. We have the best collections, in my view, in the world. They may not be as famous as some of the others, they may not be as well promoted, but the product, the art product and the talent, the performing arts talent, we have the best in the world. We know it, we've just got to make sure the rest of the world know it.
Well, I'm hoping that everybody who's visited from overseas has seen exactly what our Deputy Premier is talking about, whether it's at the Art Gallery, the Australian Museum, the Powerhouse, the MCA, the Opera House. We really do have an extraordinary diversity of galleries, living museums, and then of course our fantastic regional sector, which we mustn't overlook. And I'm sure there are many colleagues here today that will talk about the importance of regional arts and how the role of tourism. And if you're visiting, as I do from time to time, visiting a regional town, what do? You go to the local gallery and see what is happening, what local artists there are, and so on and so forth. So it's a really fantastic discipline to be working in my opinion. I think our time has come. I think optimism has been a great theme for this conference, and I'd like to ask you to join me in saying a very big thank you to Troy Grant, our very wonderful Minister for the Arts and Deputy Premier. Thank you for talking to me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.